Good morning, all. Good news. We're getting sued. Not really us directly, but the NAR is being sued. No news to anybody here, as if you've been paying attention. We've talked about it for the last year plus, probably. I'm not sure when this motion actually started. Nothing to sneeze at, though, because it is some of the same attorneys, some of the same law firms that went after big tobacco. They went after some of the banking industries and things like that at different times then as well. So the NAR put in a motion to dismiss this entire lawsuit, the lawsuit being around buyer agent commissions, more specifically that the seller's paying a commission that is then being shared with the buyer's agents. Their argument is that it is driving up the cost of real estate and making buyers pay a fee that they normally wouldn't have to pay, and inflating the cost to them, inflating the cost to all the consumers involved, and driving up the price of real estate entirely. So I'll get to some of the highlights here. I took a lot of I actually got quite a bit put together here from Inman News, a copy of the actual lawsuit. So there's 25 pages. If you need help sleeping, you can kind of get through that entire thing. Not that it directly affects any of us today, but it does have the possibility of affecting our entire industry as a whole. So what this could do is potentially put it to where we have, and I'll get back to this, our listing agreement with a seller. We'll get into the specifics of that, but then the backside of it would be the buyer commission would have to be in a buyer agency agreement. Then you would have to have a buyer agency form, basically an exclusive listing or exclusive buyer agency with the buyer. Nothing wrong with that. We've talked about that before in the past. I think that's probably a good practice we need to get into. But from the backside of this, we'll come back to the listing agreement here. So you can all read, but I'll just get through some of the highlights. In denying the motion to dismiss, Judge Andrew Wood argued that the plaintiffs being the buyers would have substantially lower commission. The sellers would have substantially lower commissions if not for the buyer broker commission rules. Rules have created an artificial inflation in commission rate. So their argument is that whatever we charge, we typically charge 6%, would not be that high if we didn't have to pay a buyer agreement. So I'll pause there. So the argument is, from our standpoint, which we should be doing anyways, if you have a listing agreement, it says right here under brokerage fee, what we're paying, and you can all have access to it, what we're charging. I've got typed in there 6%. And their argument, I think, takes away from it here at the bottom. Seller hereby permits broker to offer the following compensation to the buyer brokers and or cooperating broker. And it spells out exactly what that is. I've got 2.4% of our 6% listing agreement, which is a 60-40 split, kind of the norm in our area. So there's nothing set in stone as part of the Sherman antitrust. There's by law, we cannot affix what the commissions are going to be or what the splits are going to be between office and office, agent and agent, area and area. Within the office, we can mandate what the commission would be. It's up to the broker to decide, if there's going to be a minimum commission or a flat rate that it has to be charged. We're pretty flexible with that. We recommend that all our agents get at least 6%. Have a minimum fee if you need to. But again, if you can get more, fantastic. If you need to go down a little bit, more power to you if you need to make the deal happen, but we would like to try to get everything in there. It's not set in stone, but that is definitely not across the board. There's no flat fee with that. Where we're getting at is with this, we want to make sure that we're spelling out exactly how much of that commission is being offered to a buyer's agent, which I think would, in essence, get around what their argument is. And I'll get down to some of these comments that we had for some of this here. They had some good thoughts on this. So, again, they're talking about artificial inflation. Their argument is that the pricing, so $100,000 house wouldn't be $100,000 if we weren't offering our buyer agency commission. Their argument would be the price of the home would not be $100,000. It would be, $98,400 or whatever that $2,600 or $2,400 would be. It would be a couple $1,000s less. Again, you can look in here, but NAR argued that the supply and demand would set the pricing of the home. So if the demand for the market is $100,000, it's going to sell for $100,000 regardless if there's any commission or specifically this buyer agency commission. Other part of NAR's argument is that now buyers are going to be unrepresented in large part because they'll be going straight to the listing agent, be going straight to the seller. So it's going to create a lot of instances where there's going to be dual agency, where a buyer could have had their own representation again, the lawsuit argues that a buyer should work out an agreement directly with the buyer agent and they should be paid accordingly. And there's a whole lot more in here. I'm not going to get into it. You can read through it here. It's a pretty quick read. It only takes a few minutes. The pricing would make it more unaffordable for a buyer then, because they need their down payment, they'll need their closing costs. Now they need to come up with 1, 2, 3% to pay towards a buyer's agent, which again, the argument would be that it'd be the other way, that they can't pay $100,000 for that house. Now they can only pay $97,600, $98,600 because they got to pay $2,400 commission to a buyer's agent. So a lot of hypotheticals here. Our boys at RE/MAX here, boys and girls here, said that the international franchisor will continue to vigorously defend ourselves against this complaint that is baseless. Keller Williams didn't have a comment, but this is it's not just us. It's Home Services America, Keller Williams, RE/MAX, Realogy, Long and Foster companies, HSF. I mean, so it's pretty much every franchisor is. I think Compass was involved in that then as well. What you need to do about that, as of right this second here, and I had to go find this article. I couldn't get it to link up from Inman, but this is the 25-page report here of the actual lawsuit. I got through a chunk of it. It is a ton of legalese, but again, just they go through the highlights above here. Arguments from some of the agents below. I found some comments on a different page here. I kind of put some of them together here, kind of the pros and cons. Some people are really bashing on the industry, but a lot of it makes pretty good sense to where kind of the arguments we've already had, that if a seller doesn't want to pay a buyer commission, they can argue that out with the listing agent. They can negotiate that out. There's nothing saying any fees have to be paid to anybody in particular. If a seller doesn't want to pay a buyer agency, then that needs to be reflected in the listing agreement. So what we can do for now is make sure your sellers know exactly what they're signing. They're paying a commission. Part of that's being offered to the selling agent. We do have our form and compliance processing fee on there. So as long as they know what they're there with or what they're paying, and we have that in writing, which we all do, which we keep record of, we keep digital copies. If and when this ever comes to light, we've got some coverage. Doesn't mean that there wouldn't be some kind of damage or anything like that. I'm not one to really sit around and worry about, oh my gosh, what's our industry going to look like? What am I going to do? What do I need to do with my files now? We'll take proactive steps now to make sure that we are covering what they're worried about, and that being that there's some kind of undisclosed representation or compensation that's going on. So as long as we're above board with what we're showing to the buyer, what we're talking about with the seller, there should be no reason to worry about that. A good conversation we've talked to us in the past about a buyer. I wouldn't use the language that I don't cost you anything. They're working with me, it doesn't cost you a dime. I would just clarify that the seller's agent pays me part of the commission to help you, buy a home. And I'm representing you. I'm looking out for your best interest. However, I'm compensated by the seller's agent. Don't tell a buyer that you're working for them for free. We don't want to give that impression then either, because we're hopefully not working for free. So if this ever comes to anything, and the only reason I'm even worried about it would be because there are some big attorneys, there's some big firms behind this, so that there is a potential this could really turn into something. It's probably not going to be next week, next year. It's probably going to be a couple of years down the pike. But these type of things generally go back years. So if it's 5 years from now and they suddenly say, and because the attorneys want the big settlements, what they want, they go back and say, we're going to go back 5 years from when this lawsuit started from this plaintiff. Every buyer agent commission that's ever happened needs to be paid back or paid to some settlement fund or trust or something like that. Could have some unbelievable ramifications in our industry. So as long as we're covering what we need to do, disclosing everything, going over everything, get it in writing, keep copies, which we do, we should be good. So if anybody has any questions, certainly let me know, but get your listing agreement filled out. I think we need to keep talking about buyer agency, but the only thing you need to do to cover the buyers, just make sure you spell out to them how you're being compensated. So I'm being paid by the seller's agent. They charge a seller commission. They share roughly whatever part of that with me. Doesn't cost you a dime directly, the seller's agent paying that, because it is technically a seller expense, which the seller is agreeing to and signing to in our listing agreement, and it's spelling out that they are offering a commission. So any questions, Tom, while you're on here? If not, I'm going to head.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I have many thoughts.
Yep.
One, what is our legal side if we have a copy of the agent side of the listing sheet that shows 2.4, 2.6, 3.0? Is that what we hang our hat on as far as this is what I'm being compensated, and here's my proof of compensation from the seller?
You
Or
talking
do
from the
we need to,
buyer's agent perspective?
if I'm a buyer's agent,
Yep.
I'm bringing a buyer to a listing, how do I know what I'm getting paid and compensated from the seller? Do I need to have that in the file as a legal copy of this is
Well,
what
at
I was
that point, then
paid?
we'd have to be asking,
Yeah, I need
whoever for a
paid
copy
to
listing
the,
agreement, which they're not obligated to provide that. So
that's
the
right.
only thing I know is that you would have to get, I always keep a copy of the MLS sheet. What are they offering in the MLS sheet? For
What
a
if the
couple
MLS
reasons.
is not
One,
in our MLS?
I always ask for a copy of the sheet either way then. So if it's a Cleveland board, if it's a Columbus
Right.
board, whatever, I ask that agent to provide me an agent copy of the listing,
That's what
not the listing agreement.
That's what I'm saying. Do we
Yep.
need to ensure that that's in the packet so that we uh, have documented our compensation from the seller side?
Yeah, I don't think that would be bad. But again, that's not that more protects us to make sure that we're going to get compensated.
Correct.
That's not an agreement between you as a buyer's agent and the seller listing agreement. That would be the listing agreement. So in that instance, we need to hope that that listing agent has a valid listing contract and they keep copies of it. So if 2-3 years from now there is a lawsuit, if this comes to light, that is in there. A lot of the contracts I have seen do include language like this, but who knows? It could be
My
not
other
in there.
my other thought is, do these attorneys think this is going to save people money?
That's the
Because what's
argument.
going to happen
Yeah.
is I'm, as a listing agent, I'm going to say, hey, I'm no longer doing it for 6%, Mr. Seller. I'm doing it for 5%. I'm just keeping all 5.
Yeah, that's
I'm
exactly
offering
it.
0 to the buyer, and the buyer's agent is going to get compensated from the buyer for 3%. So now
Yep.
it's costing 8%.
Yeah, and that's exactly it then too. So you're now you're truly artificially inflating the cost of it because it's just driving the
Absolutely.
cost up of all that. There was one in one of these comments, I lost track of it now. I thought I highlighted, it must not, but basically spells out what you were saying then. Yeah, you can look through it here then. I don't want to
Yeah.
keep
I
us
mean,
with that. But,
as a buyer's agent, I'm going to put a 3%
yep,
on anything that we buy that you're going to be compensating me for, Mr. Buyer.
yep.
And I think we've got to tune that up and be ready for this stuff.
For sure. And that's, it wouldn't be a bad idea if in that instance, if we do have a buyer agency agreement that where we were compensated by the seller, but we now have this agreement, then it's in there. But for the moment, we're good with our agreement there with the seller. It spells
Right.
out who's getting paid for it. If it didn't say that, then there would be, it'd be part of settlement, real estate settlement then, that someone is being compensated and it's not being duly disclosed. Then it is on the settlement statement at the end, but it's not necessarily on the listing agreement. And that the argument could be made then that a seller could say, I didn't know, I didn't agree to pay a buyer's agent, whatever,
Right.
so I was overcharged, and these crony real estate agents decided to get in the back room and figure out how they're going to get paid. But it spells it out, and yeah, it might not hurt to get a little initial by what they're getting paid. So
How would you handle that with a FSBO on our listing agreement? You're going to say, hey, it's doing it for let's just say, for instance, I'm doing it for 4% compensation, offering 0 to a buyer's agent, but I'm the buyer's agent.
yeah, that's where we need a tuned up
only,
version of that then, just so we have something a little better with that.
almost like we need a FSBO version of a listing agreement, and then a traditional going to market listing agreement.
Nope, that's great. I think that's in our pile of 87 things that need done here. Yeah, but it's definitely one of them to where, because as of right now, we've talked about this before, our listing agreement isn't very well suited for a FSBO situation because it also implies agency and things like that to the seller, which we're not trying to do at all. We're letting the FSBO. But okay, so we'll stop that here. So we end up with a 20-minute recording. Let me know if anybody's got any questions.